All right, my dear students, we have to just move ahead because uh, certain strategies are used to read literary text. Now, it's time to discuss the use of certain strategies which, which are used for reading certain literary text. You know, these strategies they're used. There are various strategies identified, all right, which could be used when reading literary text and which can be helpful and which can help you a great deal. So the following are the description of some of the known strategy which are used often. All right. The first we steps into step into literary text. You have to just look at that as well because you know we have to just look at this steps into literary text. Alanga is listed four major steps into the process of understanding a text. This is very important. Firstly, being out and stepping into environment. All right. Uh, you, you have to just try to be there in with the environment. This is where the student make initial contacts with genre. First of all, you have to just look at contacts with the genre. All right, what kind of genre I'm going to pick up. Contact, content, structure, in language of text by using prior knowledge. You have to use your prior knowledge to make initial contacts with the genre context. Normally, the students of literature, they normally try to just look for things which are mostly described in their courses. And for surface features, like for example, mostly the students go for romantics, for middle aged. Mostly they avoid the moderns because they are very difficult to understand. So they try to move on the basic and the famous, writers and scholar of English literature. They try to, because most of the scholar and professors, they mostly ask actually, and that's why Shelley, Keats, Byron, and even Johnson and many other writers. All right, the first thing that they have to, which enables you that you have to look for things due to their surface features, and you have to decide it before. And secondly, being in and moving through in envisionment. All right, envisionment. The first is environment, and the second that is envisionment. So here in this step, students are immersed in their understanding. I mean, they using the previously constructed envisionments. All right, envisionments. They try to our envisionments means understanding. Actually, you have to understand that. The stuff more. You have to construct a kind of envisionments there. Prior knowledge and text itself to further their creations of meaning. You already have some knowledge, some prior means some knowledge from beforehand. All right, and some in the envisionment actually can improve. So when you think about it, when you read deeply, when you just think about it, and thirdly, you have to stepping back and reflecting on one's own previous knowledge or understanding. All right. So initially, you look for being in envisionment of the text. Initially, you look for the context and you try to study the novel, the genre, and many other things. Then you move on to deeper level, and then you try to, after doing this, you reflect actually on your own previous knowledge or understanding. But remember, like you have to thoroughly stepping back, reflecting on one's previous. Like for example, a person has an idea of something before, and he has got a firm and a fixed thought about a particular thing or particular writer, or he has got his own particular and personal philosophy. But after going through a text, and if he is that philosophy, He has his own vision of it, and if he goes through that, and then he needs to go back to revise his philosophy after reading that text, if that philosophy is misfit or if it doesn't fall actually there. So the point, my dear student, is that philosophy needs to be revised if it doesn't fall with it. And I think a kind of revision should take place as a person moves on more into life and he keeps on reading more and more. And lastly, stepping out in which the student react to the text or to reading experience itself. So you have to look at actually a text there. You have to that how do students react to the text, and how was that particular experience of reading it. So these are actually certain steps, which digest a text, you see, for better understanding. And I think that the application of such steps, enables the reader and even actually the writers more effectively to understand them well. And then we move on to bottom-up process. All right. Top-down, there are two approaches which are used: the top-down approach and bottom-up approach. Means, for example, in education, psychology, the bottom-up approach means that you have a theory, that deductive and inductive learning, right? That you start from the top and just go to the nitty-gritty part of that particular text. And one approach is that you start from initials, and from bottom up you go there. Besides, several models of reading strategies have been developed over the years to expand how a reader derives meaning from a text. So a passive bottom-up process, for example, doesn't require students to use all of the textual clues. So far, my case is concerned, I'm not a good reader. It takes me a great longer time period, because I mostly get stuck mostly in vocabulary of the text. I mostly get stuck in vocabulary and in the technical jargons of that. For example, if I'm going to a text of a novel or of a book, and there are various attractive vocabulary are used. So my mind, first of all, attracts to the way, and which slows down actually my reading speed. While this is a passive bottom-up approach, mostly it could not be used for all kind of text, because it will make you slow readers then. All right. The better the reader is able to make correct prediction, the less confirming why the text is necessary. Right. Initially, a good reader is to ignore. Sometimes I try to, nowadays, I have just brought some changes, you see, in my reading skill, because if I stop and get stuck on every word and everything, I'm already slower, and that would further slow down my reading speed, So therefore, a person has to go through the text, you see, rapidly. He has to understand the text, you see, more rapidly, and then he should try to predict meaning out of that particular word used in that text, because sometimes context, you see, makes meaning more clearer, and out of contextual clues you understand that the better way. All right. So therefore, my dear student, the reader uses graphonic, syntactic, and semantic clues to predict meaning, then confirms those predictions by relating them to his or her past experiences and knowledge of the language. So in such approach, we can say that in bottom up, right from the initial, you go into the nitty-gritty and try to understand the text, you see, graphemically and syntactically and semantically. So therefore, we can just look at these things there. All right. And similarly, I have to move on actually to the top-down process. This is also one of the technique, this is, as I said it, you see, process. The top-down process of reading provides relevant background of knowledge to readers. Okay, is this scholar, the immediate goal of EFL and ESL teacher is to minimize reading difficulties and to maximize the comprehension by providing culturally relevant information to students before they embark on their reading assignments. All right. The overall in brief summary of the test is that top-down process of reading provides relevant background of knowledge to readers. Okay, and the teacher a primary purpose in this particular approach is to enable the students and to minimize their reading difficulties and to maximizing their comprehension by providing actually culturally relevant information. I mean, the students have to be made, effective and active readers, and they should try. Their reading has to be encouraged by the teachers, right? Because if they encourage the students, the student reading habits, it would be super for them, and thus their comprehension it would be developed, and thus the teacher must try to to encourage their students' comprehensions by just making them realize mostly under contextual cues as well. All right. So these approaches, processes are used in able to to enable the students to understand them. And then we have aesthetic reading approach. This is another approach. Is the title suggests that the reading is just done for aesthetic sense. So reader response approach believes that aesthetic text approach is achieved through aesthetic and stance. All right. Aesthetic distance implies temporary detachment from the pleasure of the world in which a reader lives in order to enter the secondary world mapped out by the literary text. When you try to look at some text, sometimes imaginary text. So that imaginary text gives you pleasure, but that takes you away actually from the real world pleasure. For example, you do not have, the pleasure in the real world, but at least the text gives you a temporary relief, you see, of pleasure. Like for example, as you see that Shelley, when Otto Nightingale, he experiences the same thing. The singing of nightingales takes him away from this moral and physical, or from this physical and real world, and he feels a kind of transitory relief, there, and he feels pleasure, and this kind of reading actually makes him gives him pleasures, So the aesthetic approach to literature is strong emotional appeal, remember, because students are invited to live through what the speaker narrator, a character experience in their textual world. All right, so you feel their kind of emotions, okay? We can say that aesthetic approach is interaction based. Mostly interaction takes place, which means that the literary text is viewed as a structured stimulus brought alive by the reader. It offers what? A specific type of intellectual challenge, which is more open in focus than other intellectual activities. All right. Apart from that, it helps students to make connections between ideas, themes, character, and so forth. All right. The reading of literary text therefore can be improved while their experience of the world, right? Look, their experience of the world, life in other culture and people are also enriched. So, at the same time, the activities of comparing and contrasting the content of the text will develop students' ability to analyze and criticize what they have learned and already known. This is, the concluding sentence, and a very pithy and a very meaningful sentence. You have to just focus on this sentence here. Look at this. Okay, you have to just look at this sentence here. I just underlined them for your reading salience and for understanding and for bringing your focus to this. For example, when you are forced to compare and contrast the content of the text, so this will develop in students the ability to what? To analyze, remember, and to criticize, okay, what they have learned and already known. So this analytical and critical evaluation will obviously mature the students, and his mind will become more analytical and more critical. And such things, the main purpose of literature has to make its students more critical and more analytical. All right, because this is very, very important. And then we have to the efferent reading approach. Efferent reading approach. Efferent reading emphasizes on the knowledge that the text conveys. All right, it actually what? It mostly such reading gives focus on the knowledge that which the text conveys. In other words, we can say the students are mainly involved in the information they are supposed to gain from the text. Okay, I mean mostly they get information from the text they are involved in, and hence it is not appropriate to the nature of literature teaching, which contains much more than a simple opinion or knowledge. However, this approach is followed some students and some teachers. They try to get some information, but literature that is morely humanistic, in nature. So, I mean, the information that you get through fiction may not be true or correct, but because the basic and the broad nature of literature, that is, which is more than the simple opinion or knowledge, okay, that develops in you the analytical and the critical, analysis of any text, and you become more analytical and critical in life. So this is actually that efferent reading which normally students and people they apply to. These were some of the approaches, my dear student, that I talk on, and I hope that you must remember the terminology. Efferent teaching approach, okay, you must remember astute reading approach. What does you mean really by what do you really mean? Top-down process is there, what really happens there, and then bottom-up process, what exactly happens there. So these are some of the approaches I just talk on there. So please, you do try your best to do and try to understand, wherever you feel the